Hello, everyone. My name is Sofiya. Welcome to my talk, Multilingualism, Myth and Reality. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're enjoying Polyglot Gathering 2022 online. And I guess just a couple of words why I chose this topic. Well, being a multilingual immigrant language teacher myself, I've been always interested in the topic of multilingualism. I've been always fascinated by it, and it happened to be also one of the central topics, central themes of my research project. If any of you were at Polyglot Gathering last year, you probably remember or don't remember my topic. It was the complexities of identity formation, and I talked a little bit about my multilingualism there as well. But today we will talk about my multilinguals and myth that surround multilinguals. So we will take a look at six myths. Of course, there are many more, but because of time constraints, we will only take a look at six. Okay, so let's start. And the important thing here is to understand what it means to be multilingual, right? How can we identify a multilingual person? Well, there are different definitions provided by different scholars. And something that also worth mentioning here is that, I guess if you're here with me today, you probably read some articles or books, or you were, interested in the topic of multilingualism. So you probably noticed that some of the researchers they actually use the term bilingualism, bilingual, to refer to both concepts, bilingualism and multilingualism, bilinguals and multilinguals. So in order not to repeat the words, they just refer to them bilinguals and the concept bilingualism. And here we can see different definitions provided by different scholars. So of course there are more definitions, but I just chose these three. And the first definition that we have here, a bilingual is a person who can speak two or three languages. Then we have a definition provided by Diamond, and he says that it's a person that can understand or speak different languages. And the final definition is provided by Grosjean. By the way, this is the book that you can see on the slide. It's his book, which is very interesting. I highly recommend you reading it if you're interested in the topic. And later in the references, I will also provide you the name of the book, the name of the author, and everything, so you can find it later if you're interested. So, Grosjean's definition is the following. So, a bilingual is someone who uses two or three languages or dialects in their everyday life. So, as you can see, some of the researchers focus more on the proficiency, others focus more on the usage. And then this also creates a sort of a problem in order to, identify who a bilingual is. Also will be interesting to see your comments. So if you could comment which one of these definitions you like more, or maybe you use another definition by any other author. So will be also interesting to know your opinion, how you identify what's in your opinion, who is a multilingual or bilingual person. Will be interesting to see your comments. Okay, so then as we can see, so the definitions are different, and this also affects our understanding of the concept. And there are also some difficulties connected to this definition. So if we, for example, take the definition provided by Diamond, so then can we assume that, for example, a tourist who comes to a country, just visits a country, maybe speaks a couple of words, expressions, kind of understands local language, can we say that this person is bilingual in this case? Or if we take a definition of Grosjean, what if I do have some knowledge of the language, but I don't use it in my everyday life? It just maybe I moved to another country and I don't use it any longer. So as you can see, there are also some difficulties here. But regarding the Grosjean's definition, we can see that here he also includes dialects, which is very important because we can also speak not only the languages but different dialects. And we also need to remember that sign language is also here. So when we see a person who speaks sign language, we can say that this person is also bilingual. A person who knows a sign language because it's also a language, or a person who speaks different dialects. So this is very important to understand here. And as we already learned, so bilingualism is a very broad concept, and we can see a whole spectrum of different bilinguals, right? People who have certain proficiency, people who use or don't use their languages. So it's a whole spectrum of different people. Um, so let's start with the myth. And the first myth that we have here is that bilingualism or multilingualism is something very rare, that it's a rare phenomenon. But that is not true, because there are millions of people who speak or who have certain knowledge of different languages. There are communities, there are countries that speak different languages. And here it's also very important to distinguish between bilingualism as a societal phenomena and individual bilingualism, because we can also have countries, societies where several languages are spoken, where maybe not one, but three, two more languages are considered official languages. So, also interesting, if you know any countries where more than one language is official language, please comment also, or maybe you are from a country like that, would be interesting to know. And I think tomorrow we're actually having a presentation, a talk on Luxembourg. So I think it will also be interesting. So keep in mind, maybe you could also join the talk. Right. So as you can see, it's not something rare. It's actually quite well spread around the world. And but the thing here is that sometimes we can talk. There is a thing about a lit bilingualism and folk bilingualism. So you probably already noticed, because you learn languages, you deal with languages, maybe you even teach the languages, that sometimes we can see languages that are considered more prestigious than other languages. So then here we have this problem that, when you say that you speak certain languages, you get this reaction like, wow, that is so cool. But then there is a certain stigma or a certain um, we can say even discrimination regarding other languages, maybe indigenous languages or marginalized languages. And there is also a problem of this, right? Because these people are also bilinguals, but sometimes because of this stigma, they have to hide the fact that they speak this language, right? Uh, and let's move to the second myth here, and it's about bilinguals, that we all have a perfect knowledge, equal and perfect knowledge of all the languages that we know, that we speak. And that is not the case. That is simply not always the case, because a lot of the times when I talk to my students, And the very first class, they always tell me, "Oh, I'm not bilingual, but there is a person, I know someone who's a bilingual and I want to be just like them." And they tell me all that in the target language. And then, I tell them that you are also bilingual. If you are able to express whatever you want in your target language, then you have, the proficiency. You can use the language. But whenever we talk about bilinguals, for some reason, um, a lot of people, they understand balanced bilinguals under this term. So balanced bilinguals are people who have more or less equal knowledge or equal proficiency in their languages. But this is something rare. This is such a small percent of people who can say that, I have equal proficiency in all my languages. And another misconception is also that in order to be like that, you have to be simultaneous bilingual, meaning that you have to start learning your languages at a very young age at the same time. But this is also, not the case. Not you don't always have this opportunity, and it doesn't mean that if you start learning your languages at a very young age, or at birth, that you will be a balanced bilingual, that you will grow up a balanced bilingual. So most of the times we have dominant bilinguals, so people who might have or might consider one of their languages more proficient, or they feel more comfortable or more confident using the language. And we will mostly have consecutive bilinguals, people who learn their languages one after another during a period of time. And here it's also very important to understand that well, people, we are all different, right? And the way we learn the languages, the way we acquire the languages, it can be different. So the path we take can be different, but it doesn't mean that we're more or less a bilingual than other people, And here it's also something that is important to mention when I told you about balanced bilingual being a rare phenomena. It's also because we usually use our languages in different situations. So very rarely we use all the languages that we know, the same context, the same domains, equal amount of time. So usually it depends, right? We use one language with our family, we use another language for our work, maybe we use the other language for another language, sorry, for our studies, for example, which is the case with me. So, for example, I use Russian usually with my family, but my studies are in English. And then, for example, for my work, I can use Russian or English, depending who I teach, right? But not all the people are teachers. So then it's different. The amount the amount of time that we spend speaking the language. And it also depends on the context, the domain. Where do you live? Do you have enough opportunities to practice all your languages? And also depends on the interlocutors. Who do we speak to? Who are these people? How many languages do they know? And also here it would depend on our goals and purposes. So multilinguals or bilinguals, they also use their languages, keeping in their mind a goal or a certain purpose. Do I want to be accepted by a certain group of people? Do I want to connect with this person? So I use this language. Do I want to get certain kind of affiliation? What do I want? So it also depends on our desires, our goals, interlocutors, domains, context. So it depends on a lot of different situations here, right? A lot of different things. And then I think it would also be useful here to mention that when we have these different situations and different things to keep in mind, we also make certain language choices, right? So if I see that a person is a monolingual and this person doesn't only speaks one language, of course I will make a language choice to speak to that person in a particular language. Or maybe if I see that the person also speaks same languages that I do. For example, my boyfriend, he also speaks Russian, Spanish, and English. So very often we can use, the three of the languages whenever we speak to each other. We code switch, we code mix. Um, so it depends also who you're talking to and what language choices you're making at this moment. And then because of that, bilinguals can be in a monolingual or bilingual mode. So when we are in a monolingual mode, it means that we only use one language. If we're in a bilingual mode, it means we use two or more languages at the same time. We can have a base language, but use or bring up other languages into the conversation. Okay, I think it's time to move to myth number three. And myth number three is very interesting as well. Um, it's interesting, also will be interesting to know your opinion. So a lot of times it happened to me. I know other bilinguals who it happened to also, and I would like to know if it ever happened to you as well. But very often, when you say that you speak different languages, you're multilingual, polyglot, whatever, people ask you to translate certain phrases, certain expressions, certain words, and they do it with the idea that if you speak these languages, it means that you're a perfect translator, interpreter. You will just right here, right now, translate a sentence, and it will sound completely natural, completely perfect in another language. But it's not true, right? Not all bilinguals can be translators or interpreters. In fact, I can tell you that I myself studied to be a translator interpreter. I did my bachelor's degree in translating, and I can tell you that it's not easy at all, even after that many years of studies, that many years of experience. It's not for everyone. It requires a lot of dedication. It's a very specific kind of job. People train for it for many years, and it's just not that easy as some people think. But sometimes they don't understand that, and they can get upset or disappointed even, and can tell you something. Oh, so then you don't speak the languages, but of course you do. But being a translator, interpreter, or speaking or having a certain knowledge of the languages, being bilingual, these are different things, right? So we cannot have this just simplistic view that a bilingual person equals a perfect translator or perfect interpreter. It's not like that, right? Okay. So the next myth here is that bilingual people, they're also bicultural, which is also not always the case. It's very, very specific here. It's very in order to be considered bicultural or multicultural, you you can't only know a little bit of the culture. You need to also consider them part of yourself, important part of yourself. You need to be involved in different cultures. Of course, you need to understand the cultures, and people who are bicultural or multicultural, they usually, depending in what culture they are right now, they would change their attitude, they would change their behaviors, they would change maybe the way they talk, altering it to the culture where they are right now. And probably, I guess a lot of you travel to different countries or maybe live there. And when you start living and you start learning about the culture, you sort of get these signals, and you know that in this community, in this culture, some of the things are not done the same way. So you do alter, your behaviors, your attitudes, your way of living, your way of talking. And when we do these things, when we understand these things, it means that we have a certain level of biculturalism, which is also a very, very interesting concept. Okay, I think it's time to move on to our next myth, which is people who are bilingual, they prefer to express their emotions in their first language, and they also think in their first language. Okay, so I guess a lot of you receive this question from people who maybe are not multilingual polyglots. They probably asked you very, very excited. So, What language do you think in? Um, what language do you dream in? Do you have dreams in different languages? Do you prefer to express your emotions in your first language? Um, and here also something to be mentioned. You see on the slide a book by Aneta Pavlenko, Emotions and Multilingualism. And I also advise you to check out this book if you're interested in the subject, because it's very interesting. But going back to the myth, um, again, it's not that simple. So again, we shouldn't take this simplistic view on bilingualism. And it also a unique experience for each and every one of us. So it will depend a lot on the person. Regarding the emotions, it's not always the case that we prefer to use or to express our emotions, our true emotions in our first language. So there are a lot of people who prefer to use their second language when they talk about their feelings. Or there's some people who prefer to swear in their first language, or there are some people who prefer to swear in their second language. Um, there are also people who, for some reason, maybe they had some negative experiences connected to their first or their second language, and then they decide to stop using their language whatsoever. So they've been different experiences. There've been different people that you will, by the way, find in the book of Aneta Pavlenko. So they're writers who decide not to write in their first language. There are people who, due to some negative experiences that happened to them that they had to go through, maybe stigma, discrimination, they don't feel comfortable using that language anymore. So they decide to not use it at all whatsoever, maybe for some period of time, or maybe they stop using it forever. They've been also, um, I also know, like from my own experience, I know a young man who had a serious relationship uh, with a girl, and they've been dating for quite long. They were from different countries. They used her first language for communication, and then something terrible happened to her. So there was a car crash, and so he lost her. After that, it's just hard for him to use this language. So for now, he cannot use the language. Maybe he will recover and he will be able to use it at some point later in life. Or maybe this will have such a strong negative impact on him, on his life, that he would never be able to use this language again. So again, it's um, very personal, very unique experience for each and every one of us. And talking about thoughts or dreams here, I guess that many times whenever you dream, you imagine yourself speaking. Having this native like fluency in the language that you are learning at the moment, or maybe because you live in a certain community, certain country. For example, right now, currently, I'm living in Mexico, so I do have dreams of me speaking Spanish or people around me speaking Spanish. And the same when I lived in the US, I dreamed a lot in English. So it can be also because we are surrounded by the language the whole day, all day long. So then at night, we have these dreams. Or it can be also that we assign a language to a particular person. So if we know, for example, that this person in real life speaks this language, we can have like a dream with this person speaking the language. Also interesting if you ever dream in other languages. Comment will be. I would like to read your comments. But actually, so there are philosophers and there are psycholinguists who claim that. So it's one of the theories that actually people think in. So there is a language of thought that is called mentalese. So that people actually think in mentalese, and this is a pre-linguistic language. So we have our thoughts, but the first thoughts that we have, they're not actually in any language, they're pre-linguistic. And then it happens just so quickly that in just less than seconds we decide what language we want to like have our inner speech in, and then we also choose a language to actually when we speak to someone. So it happens so quickly that sometimes for us it's difficult to notice, but there are scientists, there are researchers who claim that this can be a case, that we think in the language of thought, which is mentalese, and that is pre-linguistic, that doesn't have a form of a particular language, that later when we have like an inner speech we decide what language it will be. But it just happens so quickly that we simply cannot notice it all the time. Okay, and our last myth for today is that well, this is connected to the parents who want to raise their children bilingual. And I don't know if you ever had anyone telling you that it would have a negative impact on your children, that you should never do it, that you should never speak your native language at home, because later when the child goes to school and the language that is taught at school is different, that this child won't speak, won't have this fluency, won't have this level of expertise in the language, will never be able to be proficient enough. So sometimes there are people who tell you, don't speak your native language with your child. Speak the target language. Speak in the language of the community where you live, so that later when child goes to school doesn't have any problems with acquiring with the acquisition of this language. But that's also a myth. There is no so there've been a lot of research that people have done, and it shows that there is no negative impact whatsoever on children if you speak to them in their native language, their first language, and then they go to school and they learn another language. In fact, there is even some research that says that it has a positive impact on our cognition, and that it helps children later to acquire their second language. So the more proficient, the more knowledge they have of their own language, the more successful they will be when acquiring their second language. Okay, so it's another misconception. You can teach your children your native language and not worry about that. Yes, it might be at some point that they would code switch, they would maybe feel confused sometimes, or maybe they would acquire a language a little bit slower than their peers who only speak one language, but it's absolutely normal. You need to give them some time, and but in a long-term perspective, there is no negative effect whatsoever. Okay. But also interesting to know your opinions. So write them down. I will check them out later because I cannot see your comments right now, unfortunately, but I will definitely read them. And that was the last myth. So these are my references. As I promised you, if you're interested in more in the topic of bilingualism, multilingualism, check out these references, and I hope they will help you to understand better the topic. Particularly, I would recommend you, as I told you, that Groshen, Bilingual Life and Reality, because this presentation was also based on his book. A lot of the information I took from that book. So that's it. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope it helped you to understand the concept a little bit better. I hope you learned something new today. Of course, thanks a lot to the organizers for this opportunity. And if you have any questions, any comments, we will take a look at them right now. But also, you can always send me an email. There is my email on the screen. So you can always ask me anything if you want. Okay. And it's time for the questions. Let's see your questions. Is a multilingual person a polyglot? That's a good question. Thank you so much for this question. Well, there are a lot of similarities. There is a difference also, but we can say, let's look at the similarities. So both multilingual and polyglots, they speak several languages, or they have a certain knowledge of several languages, or they use several languages, right? Depending on the definition that we want to use. And polyglots, they also have a certain knowledge of various languages. So then what is the difference here? Well, usually a polyglot is a person who has this conscious decision. I want to learn languages. I will be learning the languages. Okay, so I learned three languages. I want to move on. I want to learn another one. I want to learn 20 languages. And a multilingual, it's a person who sort of, it happened. He or she, they happen to be multilingual. Maybe you grew up in a multilingual community, a multilingual family, and you acquire these languages, maybe not even having this conscious decision, not even like deciding, oh, I want to speak that many languages, but just because you grew up in a multilingual family, multilingual community, and it sort of just happened. You happen to be multilingual, right? So, for example, talking about myself, at the age of, I don't know, um, 5 years old, I didn't decide to learn languages. It just happened to be like that because I was growing up in a multilingual community. So I would say the main difference here is just that polyglots, they have this conscious decision to learn the languages. But yes, it can be the same person. It can be the same person. So I can say about myself that I'm a multilingual, but I'm also a polyglot because I have this conscious decision to learn more languages. Okay. Well, I hope I answered your question. This is how I understand it. Let's look at the second question. When doing your research, how often did you come across the term third culture kid? Not very often, being honest, not very often. Um, I can, I don't even remember seeing this term before, third culture kid. Would be interesting to know your comments. So if you have come across this term, please let us know. I can only guess. I haven't really seen this term before, but maybe it's someone who, are we talking about immigrant parents, parents who parents who immigrated, and then their child is brought up in a third culture, because the culture is different from the culture of the parents of the child. That's how I understand, but I might be wrong. Let me know what you think, what you know about this term. Haven't seen it before, being honest. Okay, so then the next one. Let's see. Is the ability to switch quickly, effortlessly between several languages an inherent part of multilingualism, or an ability in its own right? Um, as I told you, so when we talked about this code switching, right? That multilinguals do, but that's usually when they talk to other multilinguals. But if we talk about just them, like speaking to one person and then going and speaking to another person quickly and with too much effort, I think it's just something that we learn to do as we learn languages. So because we have certain proficiency, but it also depends on your, I guess, proficiency and how you use your languages. But once you become confident and proficient enough, usually you shouldn't have any problems with, changing the languages. You can be writing something in one language, and then you switch to watching TV in another language, and then you speak with a person in a third language, and usually it happens, yeah, effortlessly, without any effort. Sorry. I hope I answered your question. Let's move to the other one. Let's see. Could you name any fundamental differences between a person who became bilingual by growing up in bilingual society versus a person who became bilingual by learning a second language at adult age? Um, as I told you, there is a misconception. Some people think that if you grew up learning different languages at the very, very early age. So you acquire the languages simultaneously at a very young age. Some people think that you will grow up to be a better bilingual person. You will have a better understanding, knowledge of your languages than if you do it later in life. But there've been research that showed that it's not the case, that you can actually learn your languages later in life. You can acquire them later in life, and it's not gonna affect your proficiency in these languages. And also the opposite, if you acquire your languages at a very young age, it doesn't guarantee that you will be very proficient in all the languages that you acquire. So again, it's very unique, and it depends on the person. Each one of us has different experiences, so we cannot like give like a definite answer that this will be like that, this will be like that. There are very different factors that are involved, different people, so it would depend. Mhm. Okay, thank you for your question. Let's move to the next one. How common is 100% balanced bilingualism? Both languages equally good. I'm from Catalonia. Most people I know speak slightly better one or the other, even if they are indeed bilingual. Yeah, it's very, very, very rare that a person can be balanced bilingual. And as I told you, it might be because it's just impossible sometimes to use all our languages to the same what do how do you say it, to the same extent, in the same context, and with the same with to the same extent, the same amount of time, because in the same context, because usually what happens is that we use different languages for different parts of our life for different purposes. So then what happens most of the time is that we can do certain things in one language but cannot do certain things in another language. So for example, in my case, I can give you my own example. Academic terms, for example, because I studied applied linguistic. I studied here in Mexico, but it's in English. I can say that it's easier for me to express these terms, to express these ideas in English than, for example, my native language, Russian, let's say. Or some of the topics, it's easier for me to discuss with my family if we talk about something that is, I don't know, something regarding a house or something like that, household, with my family in Russian, and I might not know some of the words or expressions in English for these for this kind of topics. Um, yes, so it's like that. I hope I answered your question. And I think it will be our last question because there is another talk and we have to leave. But let's do one more question. Third culture kids. Yes, all the time. It's common in expatriate international families. Being brought up in a third culture is exactly right. Okay, so I guess I guessed it right. Thank you so much for explaining this to us. Okay, so I guess it was helpful. I guess I hope it was helpful. Sorry, I hope I answered your questions. If you have any more questions, you can always email me, and you can check out the books that I showed you. They will be pretty helpful in understanding the topic. Thank you very much again, and I hope you enjoy Polyglot Gathering. Hopefully, see you soon in one of the language practice rooms. Take care, everyone. Bye bye. Thank you.